what should you grow in your garden for heart health? In the last video, I hinted at this actually a little more than I expected to, but I got so excited about talking about how to do a heart healthy garden. You know, a lot of us have limited space for gardening, and so you have to be picky on what you're going to grow. So I decided to set up a garden focused on heart health and how to put that rotation in to protect the soil so that you end up having healthier plants as well. So let's take a look at this. Welcome, I'm Sheri Traxler with Vireo Life, author of Go Forward, 28 Days to Eat, Move, and Enjoy Life God's Way. A healthy heart garden. What does this look like? I'm going to take a picture of this and put it in here, but then I'm also going to walk us through it. So here's a shot of it. A garden rotation layout, and let's make sure that I can see you and you can see me. This is going to be interesting. All right, so first off, when you're making a rotation for your garden, you want to think about the soil. That is number one, what is putting into the soil and what is taking out of the soil. So let's first, we're actually going to start not on the far side over here, but we're going to start with beans. Now, if you remember beans, let me grab them for us, either your green beans or your dried beans, these are going to put nitrogen in the soil. But what are they putting in your body? Especially the dried beans are putting in vitamin E for your heart health. Let me put these down. So when those beans put in nitrogen into your soil, that means that what comes next needs to need nitrogen. Well, it just so happens that tomatoes really need a lot of nitrogen to produce well. So let's say that this was year 2, this rotation is going this way. So the previous year, the beans would have been here. Guess what? That means the tomatoes have all this nitrogen. But the tomatoes are using a lot of the nitrogen in that soil. So what comes next after them is the parsley coming over. It doesn't have to, I mean, it needs nitrogen. You know, all plants need nitrogen, but it doesn't need a lot. And then what comes after that will be the Brussels sprouts. Well, with the Brussels sprouts, these little guys, the Brussels sprouts, they need nitrogen, but think of it as opposite. If you have a lot of nitrogen, you have little sprouts. If you have little nitrogen, you do need some. If you have little nitrogen, you have a lot of sprouts. So it's a choice between, if you have a lot of nitrogen, you're going to have some big pretty leaves, but you're not going to have much that you're wanting to eat. Now, the reason I chose Brussels sprouts in this rotation versus cabbage, which is in the same family, is because if you've got a small space garden and you're not planning on, making this a commercial crop, it's going to be something that you and your family eat off of, broccoli or cabbage, once those grow and you cut off the head, you're pretty much done. And you've grown all this space for 1 or 2 broccoli heads. Versus Brussels sprouts, that it's going to keep growing taller and taller and taller, and you pick off the sprouts from the bottom as you go, and it'll last you a full spring or a full fall, which in my growing season, that's how my growing season is, that Brussels sprouts are a spring and a fall crop, whereas the beans and the parsley are summer. Let's go to the next one. Your tomatoes and bell peppers, which is in that first bed, that is a summer, these are both summer, and I put in parenthesis in that section basil as well, because basil is a really nice companion plant for tomatoes. So having some there is there, you normally are going to have some room on an edge of that bed to put some basil. The tomatoes, again, are great in lycopene for heart health, vitamin E and vitamin C, both high in bell peppers for heart health. And these are easy to grow. The tomatoes, I alluded to this in the last video, kind of jumped the gun. Tomatoes, we have these self-seed every year. And then whatever bed we had them in, once they volunteer, all we have to do is dig up that volunteer and transplant it to the bed where it's supposed to be. Parsley. This one is a fun one. Now, I've grown these from seed. I have grown them from buying in the nursery, but you can also just buy them at your grocery store if your grocery store carries them. But here's the trick with these. You know, it says, it gives you directions on the back. You know, put it in a saucer, put some water in there, and they just look so beautiful in here, don't they? But don't be surprised when you take them out. I did this last video. They really flop over, but that doesn't mean that they're unhealthy. Don't pull it out and go, oh no, that's bad. No, it's not bad. It's just because they've not been growing in sun, you can see it's what's called leggy. I used to wonder, what does leggy mean? You know, I was talking to somebody who specialized in herbs, and she said, well, you know, it gets leggy. I was like, what's leggy? Okay, so here's the explanation of leggy. When it's grown in the shade, it gets long stalks with leaves at the top, but doesn't have a lot of leaves all the way up. Simple solution for this. Make sure you get this some water and get it in sun. And then I'm going to do this tonight for a recipe. Cut off most of the top so that now all of this begins to continue to grow and put out extra leaves. Quick review. 4 simple beds for rotation. Tomato, bell pepper with some basil, beans to add nitrogen into the soil, Brussels sprouts in my zone, that's spring and fall, and then parsley. That is going to keep you supplied in heart-healthy vegetables spring, summer, and fall. And that particular order of rotation is going to mean you don't have to fertilize as often in the soil. In fact, you might not have to fertilize at all. You may have to do some other type of amending, you know, for your garden, but from a nitrogen standpoint, from a basic soil standpoint, that's going to be a nice rotation. Last tidbit on rotation. I have had people say, well, that's such a small garden. Why do you rotate? If you think about a large commercial plot rotating, it's important because of pests and diseases. Something this small isn't going to help that. The main reason for rotating 4 small beds, or in this case even 4 pots, it doesn't even have to be in the soil, it can just be 4 pots. With that, you're going to be able to not have to fertilize as often because beans are putting in what the tomatoes need to take out. Let me give you a quick tomato story. Why I get so excited about sharing garden stuff. One of my clients who had never done any gardening before got inspired to say, I want some fresh things that I've grown. And so he just started with tomatoes. It was that simple. Just got some pots and planted tomatoes. And like all of us when we're starting, we don't know. So he was getting these little pots for these tomatoes. And I was like, you're going to need some bigger pots. They're going to grow. And he got excited like I do and had several different kinds and realized once they got to maturity, they were taking over his deck. So my recommendation is don't get as gung-ho as what me and he did and what a lot of us do of I'm going to plant 6 different kinds. Start with a tomato plant, a bell pepper plant, and 1 or 2 basil plants. 1 or 2 bean plants. Here's a note on the beans. Make sure that they are pole beans. If you use what's called bush beans, they're going to grow like a bush and you're not going to get as much in that small space. So a pole bean grows up on a pole. So you put a couple of stakes in the ground and allow the beans to wrap up around that. The Brussels sprouts and 1 or 2 Brussels sprout plants is going to be all you need on that. Often when you go into a nursery, they're going to come in packs of 4. Guess what? You don't have to use them all just because you bought them. I know that that's hard, and you can give them to a neighbor, give them to a friend, take them to your workplace and put them in the break room. Somebody will take it home and plant it in their front yard, I guess. And then the parsley, that you just get 4 or 5 plants and they will spread out over time. Hope that this helps you. Remember to subscribe. Make sure you hit the little bell so that you can know when we are creating new videos. Now, last tidbit on this, Instagram. I start our gardening in March, and I'm going to be posting on my Instagram account this year different pictures of our process as we're going through the gardening. So make sure that you're following me on Instagram as well. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, find your path and fulfill your potential.